While America was busy dealing with communists, nuclear bombs, and whatnot, there was a lot of societal changes going on in America. Um, let's back it up to post World War II world. I'm talking late 40s, early 50s. Okay, so we have 9 million young men and women who had just finished serving in World War II. Now, our president, Franklin Roosevelt, wanted to set something up to say thank you to those soldiers, those brave men and women who had offered their lives to defend our country. So something comes about called the GI Bill, and we'll get to that in a minute, but that's going to become very, very important for America's economic prosperity. In the 50s, we're going to see the development of the interstate highway system. And overall, we're going to see a rise in middle class life in America. And I'll hit on all these points right now. So, like I said, the GI Bill was targeted for the men and women who had served overseas. And this was to take care of veterans. The GI Bill gave a lot of great benefits to these people, provided them with pay, college tuitions, loans, medical care. Suddenly, 9 million people who came from poor backgrounds had access to college, which they might not have ever had the opportunity to go to. So, as a result, the generation that served in World War II is going to become relatively affluent. Just because so many people qualified for the GI Bill, suddenly we had a large expansion in people going to college and getting houses. And America really sort of becomes a thriving middle class country. Now, why are we talking about the interstate highway system? Cars and also communists. So let me explain. Um, America was frightened of communists, and we needed a way to get out of Dodge Earth pretty easily. Now, the nuclear missiles would have targeted the big cities first. But the problem was in the early 50s, late 40s, America's roads were still pretty crap. I'm talking dirt roads, rocky roads, stuff like that. And the government wanted people to be able to evacuate out of the cities. So, what this leads to is the Interstate Highway Act, which will provide lots of nice, flat, new roads, and people would be able to evacuate really, really quickly because the roads were nice. Now, that ultimately never came to pass for Americans. Luckily, we were never nuclear attacked, but after World War II, like I said, American middle class is thriving. Everyone's buying cars. And since everyone's buying cars, they're using these roads to go places. This is the first time America could freely and easily get from place to place. In a matter of 150 years, we went, a matter of 200 years, I'm sorry, a matter of 200 years, we went from covered wagons to things with engines that could go forever and ran a little bit of gas. And now I move up to the 60s. So America was booming, and Lyndon Johnson wanted to keep it that way. So his big initiative, besides the Vietnam War and dealing with all that, is lifting up the poorest among us in America. He wants to create a great society by waging a war on poverty. Now, he wants to make sure that people who are unemployed or short on work could still live and sustain themselves. So, he provides all sorts of programs to benefit people. And as a result, what he does is poverty in America sharply declines in that decade. Um, He introduces things called the Medicare and Medicaid Acts and the Economic Opportunity Acts. Medicare and Medicaid was a government assistance program designed so that people who could not afford health care or didn't have insurance, they still wouldn't, feel victim to disease. Because after all, you can't work if you're sick. and you can't pay to get better if you don't have the cash for it. And as you can notice in this graph, sorry, this is blocking it, but the years he implemented it, poverty declined sharply in America. So people had a little bit of money and um, we're getting more well off. Now, what we're going to find out is that even though all this is great, there are still those amongst us who are not getting the same kind of care and treatment that everyone in America should be getting. And unfortunately, I'm talking even veterans of African American descent after World War II. So the 60s is also going to become the era of the civil rights movement.